Hey guys, how's it going? Kriparian here, and this is Legends of Runeterra. It's a Riot League of Legends basically based card game. I'm streaming it right now. This is basically the first time that you'll get to see this card game, and I'll give you guys a bit of an introduction to it. Nobody is an expert at this game, though some people might pretend to be. No one's played this game that much yet, so if you want to see us really getting into the details of it, you guys are welcome to come and check out my stream, well, right now, even. We'll be streaming it for a bit. We'll see how the game works out. Again, I haven't really played it enough to tell you guys, wow, it's the best game ever or whatever, or yeah, it's just a pretty solid card game. It's certainly different than many of the other card games, which gives it potential, which is why I'm going to be trying it. So basically the way it works is you draw cards. You get like the creature minion type cards. Those are your guys that are going to be in your hand that you haven't played yet. You get 1 mana each turn, so you incrementally curve out pretty well. It's kind of like Hearthstone in that regard. There's many different abilities. I'm not going to begin to talk about them too quickly. I'll explain the turn sequencing in a moment here. But basically, the mana ramps 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't use up mana, you get spell mana. So you can see on the right-hand side, where it's like opponent's turn right now, it's like 3. Each player has 3 mana, but also there's like 0, and then there's like 3 empty bowls. That's spell mana. So if you have mana that you don't use, it can get stored, but you can't cast cards with it. You can only cast spells. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now the deck that I'm playing here, I actually just beat everyone with it in one of these like private play tests. So it's possibly one of the best decks out there. I don't know. I only played for a few hours. So the way it works is you play stuff from your hand, but you play it kind of like on the bench. That's what that little thing in the middle there is. So between your hand and the cards that are fighting on the board, it's kind of like the bench. You can have up to 6 dudes there, and those are your guys that you can utilize in combat. Simply put, you can play something on the bench and then attack with it right away. But there's some issues to doing that. Now the cards have pretty simplistic effects. Mana cost in the top left, and you have the attack on the right, attack on the left, health on the right. They don't regenerate health, but there are some abilities like Braum, who has regeneration, so you can just wither down. Regeneration is a typically rare mechanic. There's tons of mechanics in the game, and you'll have to figure out those as you play. You can't just like memorize all of them from a video that I'd make on the first day of this game being out there. Now you guys can see there's a lot of like, kind of like whatever minions, there's like spiderlings, but there's the League of Legends, the big guys. There's like Elise there. You saw Braum in my hand, so those are like the champion cards. You can have up to 6 champion cards in your deck. You can have 3 of any one type of card in your deck. So you can have 3 Braums and let's say, I think I have 3 Darius in this deck. You saw when I played Braum though, the Braum in my hand actually turned into a different card. So each champion, when you play it on your bench or when it is in play and you draw another copy, it becomes a specific card. The mechanic here that I'm highlighting, I think is called Challenger. You basically get to pick who is going to block in any given situation, and that's pretty good. Now there's only 6 possible bench dudes, and it can get a bit competitive. The champions are quite good. I hovered there for a moment with Braum. The champions, they have a condition upon which if you meet, they level up. So kind of mimicking like League of Legends in a way. It's pretty cool mechanic. Most champions get quite a bit stronger when they level up, and some have like basically game-winning effects when they level up. Champions are certainly some of the stronger cards out there, but you can only have a limited number of them. So my opponent here, he did a 5-1 challenger against my Braum. That's very tragic for me, and he's attacking with 2 other dudes. Now the other 2 dudes, I can block them if I want to, but I don't have to block them. If I don't block them, I just take the damage kind of like on my Nexus. That's the thing over there all the way to the left. I have 19 health, my opponent has 18 health. If that goes to 0, you're dead. So it's pretty straightforward in that regard. Now, let's talk about combat. Combat is the part that's actually pretty tricky, and the timing of it is pretty tricky. So here's how it works. Now, each player gets their chance to do something, and then it's the other player's chance to do something. But one turn is kind of like one player's attack sequence going off. So now you can see it's round 6. This is like my turn. I am the attacker on round 6. That's why you can see that sword there below the pass button. That's me. That's my side of the board. That means that I act first and I can attack. On this turn, Trump cannot attack me. I can only attack him. He's a defender. I am the aggressor this turn. Now, I also have the initiative, so I can choose to either play a card or attack right away. Now, if I make a move, then my opponent reacts to that move. So if I play a card on the attack phase, my opponent can choose to play a card. But if I attack first, my opponent cannot play a card. He has to defend. So because of that very significant mechanic, and again, I'll repeat, if you attack before you play a card, the defender cannot play a card, which kind of means you're always playing at least one turn ahead in Legends of Runeterra. You're always playing one turn ahead. It's not just what's happening this turn, it's what's happening on the next attack phase should I or my opponent attack before a card can be played. Now you can play cards and choose to attack later, but typically what that results in a bit of an equalizing mechanic. That meaning that if you're winning by a lot, it's almost always better to attack before playing a card. If you're winning by a lot and you start playing cards, it becomes a bit of a problem because, well, he can play cards to block your biggest dudes. You don't want that. You want your biggest dudes to connect to his face. So that's kind of the attack sequence in the game. And in combination of the attack sequence, there are some spells. Now, the deck that I'm playing has very few spells. Intentionally. It's basically a dude buffing and healing deck. I basically thought I'd make a deck with the hardest to kill minions in the game, and well, it turns out it's pretty good. Again, I don't know how many I won. I lost one to an aggro deck when I drew badly, and I won all of my other matches with this in a few hour play session. So yeah, pretty OP to play just stats, it turns out. So that's what I did. Now, normally, the other decks are going to have more spells than the one that I'm playing. I have a few spells, but not a lot. There are two types of spells in this game. There's the spell that's slow, and there's the spell that's fast. The spell that's slow, it's kind of like playing a dude. What that means is, if you play a spell that's slow when you're on the attack, your opponent can play a dude. So those are not too bursty, typically. They can be, because your opponent might not have much to play, but they're typically not too bursty. Now, there are fast spells as well. Fast spells aren't necessarily more expensive, they don't have as heavy of effects most of the time. Some of them do, but most of them don't. Fast spells can be played in the middle of combat. You can actually, start doing your moves and then do the fast spells, and your opponent can't actually react if you're on the attack. There I played a slow spell that grants all my guys +3/+3. That's an extremely powerful slow spell, as it turns out. And Braum, who normally doesn't have attack, now has a lot of attack, can challenge my opponent's champion, one-shotting it, and then getting a nice little heal because he has regeneration. That's kind of the point of the deck. This deck is kind of like just play stats constantly, super stat efficient cards, particularly ones with regeneration. And another mechanic, again, there's a lot of mechanics, but one of the mechanics is called Tough. So that's the 6/6 there, second from the right. You take one less damage from all sources. Surprisingly good in the early game, and surprisingly good if you're running buffs, and clearly I am. You can get started with this deck or a number of others. From what I remember, the deck that the game started us off with, at least, maybe it'll be different when you play, they were pretty good decks. Overall, the cards are fairly well balanced so far. Of course, people will find some game-breaking decks. We'll have to see how they're actually going to handle this type of card game. But it's different enough that I think it's worth a try if you're, into card games. So you can check me out playing it. I don't exactly remember when everyone else can play it, but it's going to be through many different stages. We're going to be able to stream it for a few days at this point, starting, well, again, right now. So if you want to see it, if you want to see me learn it, if you want to learn through me, make sure to check out my stream tonight and possibly in the nights to come. And yeah, we'll see what happens and what we learn about the game. In terms of deck building, because I talked quite a bit about my deck, you basically can choose 2 factions. Now, I'm not going to like list all the factions and stuff because, oh, this is basically a champion leveling up. It's like, ooh, you get animation. It's pretty nice because you really get to understand that something significant is happening in the game. So it's like you're not going to miss that. Okay, you might, but I hope not. All right, I hope these viewers. You guys that watch these videos, you wouldn't miss something like that, all right? You guys will make it. So, deck building. You choose 2 factions. One of the factions I'm playing is Demacia, I believe. That's a pretty well-known faction. My League of Legends lore, it's kind of, you know, on the low to medium side, okay? So I'm not going to do as well as some of you guys will. But yeah, the main reason why you'd pick the factions is because, well, most of the cards have a faction associated with them. In fact, I believe all the cards have a faction associated with them. So if you want to play some specific cards, if you want to play some specific champions, you have to commit to those factions. Now, I haven't seen any single faction decks, but I imagine that's basically possible because you don't have to have like a limited number of cards from each faction. Typically, decks are 2 factions, and from what I have seen, are typically fairly even between the 2 factions. But there are some mechanics that are actually super powerful if you hit a specific faction on like your next draw or something like that. So I imagine a mono faction deck or a nearly mono faction deck, maybe you'd have like 90% of the deck 1 faction, certainly viable. Now this is a card game, and you know, there's not a whole bunch of websites out there to tell you what's really good and what wins and how to play this and that. So yeah, we don't really know for sure. We're just gonna have some fun, and I'm gonna learn the game, and we'll just leave it at that for now. So that's it. Saw the tough mechanic there working out. You can see how my dudes, just the really big cards, just keep snowballing the board constantly. You'll probably see a lot of these cards that I'm playing in this deck quite a lot, I would imagine. I think that stats matter a lot in card games, particularly in card games where you have an automatic linear mana curve. So keep that in mind. Tempo is very important, but board space is very important as well. Having 6 guys for a limited board makes it so you want to chump block and you want to like free up some space quite often. For example, like it's a game where you want to curve out and play stats, right? But pretty big but. If you really want to play like your 7 mana dude and you already have 6 guys in play, if you are like, well, how do I remove guys from my board? I'm attacking. Well, if you attack with the big guys, your opponent's going to block with like 1/1s. But if you attack with your 1/1s, your opponent's just not going to block them to stop you from playing your big card. So there's a lot of considerations that you always have to understand when playing. And I think it seems like a game where the better player wins a bit. So we'll have to see about that. And I think this is the victory turn. There we go. Hope you guys enjoyed it. More on stream, and I'll see you guys in the next one.